not seeing the chat. Ah, okay. It's kind of being slow. Interesting. Well, it shows that there's 5 people on here, but that little numbers thing is always very unreliable, unfortunately. Because I've had like 6 people type in the chat that they're there, and it says like 1 person's on. Hey, Robert. Welcome. Can you guys hear me? Is everything good? Anything lagging? Douse, welcome, my friend. Bella and Gautam. All right, everything's sounding good. Very good. So, as you guys are familiar with the drill, we'll give it a couple of minutes to have people come on in, and then we'll get started. Hello, Steve. Welcome. Hello, Robert. Welcome. This happy Visakha. At Empty Cloud today, we had a Buddha statue installation. So we got to see the crane workers try to finagle the Buddha statue down and put it all into place and things like that. It was quite an interesting experience. Then we had many Thai people here for Dana. Robert's saying must have been a good meal. Well, Anthony, was it a good meal?
Excellent.
Yeah, it was pretty good. They had one of the Donna supporters has a restaurant, and he made eggplant parmesan. And I said to him, this is coming from an Italian. That's pretty good eggplant parmesan. The Thai gentleman. Oh, hello, Gleam Tech. Welcome. All right. Okay, so it's close to 8:05. I think we'll get started. Steve is already asking a question. Can you tell us a bit about Empty Cloud? Yeah, I will. I'll say that after we start out with our initial chanting. So I'll put a link to the Maggaseka chanting book in the chat. And I think we're going to chant the Adio Etangako Muggo. We're going to chant the Noble Eightfold Path in honor of Visakha and in honor of this weekend I completed the latest Maggaseka weekend retreat on living the Noble Eightfold Path in the modern world. And actually, on the Discord, we usually do an Apostada session where we kind of discuss our successes and failures of living the Noble Eightfold Path in the world. So maybe we can do a little bit of that today. Some people were asking me on the Discord, hey, Bante, are we doing a session? And I said, well, we'll see. But let's start out with our chanting first. All right. So we're going to do page 61. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Ayankosa majjima patipada tathagatena abhisambuddha chakku karani jnana karani upasamaya abhinyaya sambuddhaya nibbanyaya samvattati ayang eva ariyo tangiko maggo sammaditi dukke jnanang dukkha samudaye jnanang dukkha nirodhe jnanang dukkha nirodha Gaminiya patipadaya jnanang samma sankappo nekkamma sankappo avyapada sankappo avihingsa sankappo samma vacha musavada veramani pisunaya vachaya veramani parusaya vachaya veramani sampappalapa veramani Samma kammanto panatipata veramani adinadana veramani kame sumechachara veramani Samma ajivo micha ajivang pahaya samma jivena jivakang kapeti Samma vayamo samvarappadanang anupanang papakanang akusalanang dhammanang anupadaya chandang janeti vayamati viryang arabbati chittang pagganhati padahati pahanappadanang uppannanang papakanang akusalanang dhammanang pahanaya chandang janeti Vayamati viryang arabbati chittang pagganhati padahati bhavanappadanang anupanang kusalanang dhammanang uppadaya chandang janeti Vayamati viryang arabbati chittang pagganhati padahati Anurakkanappadanang uppanang kusalanang dhammanang tittiya Asammosaya biyo bhavaya vepulaya bhavanaya paripuriya chandang janeti vayamati viryang arabbati chittang pagganhati padahati sammasati kaya kayanu viharati atapi sampajano satima vineya loke abhijja domanasam Vedanasu vedananu viharati atapi sampajano satima vineya loke abhijja domanasam Chitte chittanu viharati atapi sampajano satima vineya loke abhijja domanasam Dame sudammanu viharati atapi sampajano satima vineya loke abhijja domanasam Samma samadhi vivecheva kamehi viveccha kusalehi dhammehi savitakkang savicharang vivekajang piti sukkang pattamajjanang upasampajji viharati Vitakka vicharanang vupasamaya ajjatang sampasadanang chetaso ekodi bhavang Avitakkang avicharang samadhijang piti sukkang duttiyajjanang upasampajja viharati. Pitya cha viraga upekkako cha viharati. Sato cha sampajano sukkang cha kayena patisangvedeti. Yantang arya achikkanti upekkako satima sukha viharati. Tatyajjanang upasampajja viharati. Sukhassa cha pahana dukkhassa cha pahana pubbeva somanassa domanassanang attangama adukkang sukkang upekkasati parisuddhing chatuttajjanang upasampajja viharati. All right, now the English. Let's just check the chat. All right, doesn't seem like... P. Gurgle, welcome. All right, so let's do the English, and then we'll move forward here. The Noble Eightfold Path. This is the middle way awakened to by the perfect one, which gives rise to vision and knowledge, which leads to peace, wisdom, enlightenment, and Nibbana, the Noble Eightfold Path. Right view of suffering, of its origin, of its cessation, of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Right intention of renunciation free from craving, of goodwill free from aversion, of compassion free from cruelty. Right speech, abstaining from false speech, abstaining from malicious speech, abstaining from harsh speech, abstaining from useless speech. Right action, abstaining from taking life, abstaining from stealing, abstaining from sensual misconduct. Right livelihood, giving up wrong livelihood, earning one's living by a right form of livelihood. Right effort, determination to prevent unarisen, evil, unwholesome states of mind from arising by making effort, arousing energy, applying mind, and striving. Determination to abandon evil, unwholesome states of mind that have already arisen by making an effort, arousing energy, applying mind, and striving. Determination to develop wholesome mental states that have not yet arisen by making effort, arousing energy, applying mind, and striving. Determination to maintain and perfect wholesome mental states that have already arisen and not to allow them to disappear, but to bring them to growth, to maturity, and to the full perfection of development by making effort, arousing energy, applying mind, and striving. Right mindfulness. One dwells contemplating body in the body, ardent, clearly comprehending, mindful, having subdued longing and grief for the world. One dwells contemplating feelings and feelings, ardent, clearly comprehending, mindful, having subdued longing and grief for the world. One dwells contemplating mind in mind, ardent, clearly comprehending, mindful, having subdued longing and grief for the world. One dwells contemplating phenomena in phenomena, ardent, clearly comprehending, mindful, having subdued longing and grief for the world. Right concentration. Quite secluded from sense pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states of mind, one enters and dwells in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied thought and sustained thought, with rapture and happiness born of seclusion. With the subsiding of applied thought and sustained thought, one enters and dwells in the second jhana, which has internal confidence and unification of mind, is without applied thought and sustained thought, is filled with rapture and bliss born of concentration. With the fading away of rapture, one dwells in equanimity, mindful and discerning, and one experiences in one's own person that bliss of which the noble ones say, happily lives one who is equanimous and mindful. Thus one enters and dwells in the third jhana. With the abandoning of pleasure and pain, and with the previous disappearance of joy and grief, one enters and dwells in the fourth jhana, which has neither pain nor pleasure, purity of mindfulness and equanimity. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right, friends. Christine, welcome. I assume Andrew is with you as well. Rupa, welcome. Welcome. All right. So, friends, welcome to another Dhammapalooza, another Monday night. And so we have the beginning of our 2-hour festival of Dhamma. We just did some chanting, and later on we're going to do some meditation. In between, who knows? We know that every Dhammapalooza is a little different because it is community driven, right? So those of you who already know, some of you are already giving questions in the chat, that's fine. So how these things are going to go, we'll see. If you have any questions you'd like me to answer, you can put that in the chat. If there's any specific Buddhist topics you'd like me to talk on, you can put that in the chat and I'll talk on those topics. If there's any discussion, any kind of topic you'd like the community as a whole to discuss, also we can put that in the chat. And so we'll see how it flows. You guys know that when I create the live stream, I only have Dhammapalooza in the date because I don't know what the topic is going to be. And then once it closes out, I add the topic. So let's see what you guys have in the chat. We'll give it a few minutes. And actually, since there's some questions about Empty Cloud, I'll talk about that while you guys put your questions, topics, or discussion topics in the chat. And again, as always, if you guys are talking to each other in the chat, you know, even while I'm talking, that's not interrupting me. It's perfectly okay. I want you guys to, you know, to engage with each other. You know, some of you come on and you say hello to each other, stuff like that. That's great. You should definitely do that. So while you know things are going on, if you're talking to each other in the chat, no problem. I will keep an eye out on the chat to see when questions and maybe interesting comments come up, and I'll repeat them. But so let's talk about Empty Cloud. So some of you, I mean, I know we share some people. Some of you do the Empty Cloud streams as well as my streams, right? So many of you probably know enough about Bhante Sudasu and Ayasoma. But you know, they started in New York in a house in Rockaway in Queens. And then the community was able to support them to get this wonderful place, this former Catholic monastery in West Orange, New Jersey, in the suburbs here amongst the houses. And this place, Empty Cloud, this mansion that the monastery is in, is 100-year-old building based on a 500-year-old building in France. So it's very my style. It's very this like medieval like style. Even like the room that I'm in is kind of like in what would have been the servants' quarters, and everything's like dark and damp. There's nice big bright rooms up on the top, the second floor, but some of the smaller rooms are in these like dark corners. It's a really interesting place. But you know, for something like 70 or 80 years, it was a place for Catholic monastics to live. And now it's a place where Buddhist monastics live. And they, you know, over the couple of years that they've had this place, they've been gradually adding Buddha statues. And what's her name? I'm going to botch it. Avalokiteshvara. You know, statues from the Mahayana. They like those statues. Also, those statues are big in Thai tradition as well, and I think even in a little Sri Lankan. But so that's this statue. This statue was handmade, or whatever. It was made for Empty Cloud in Burma, and it was made like 2 years ago. But it just got over here due to COVID issues, and then the whole, you know, military coup and issues going on in Burma. So, and then it got to America like 4 or 5 months ago, and now finally, it's on its in its final resting place. So it was quite interesting. I guess it's a Thai style Buddha. It's interesting. The robe is very intricate, and it has that kind of like, I don't know what I'm hoping it's not disrespectful. It has like that headband that you see a lot in like the Thai. You see like the Devas have that kind of like headband thing. Uh, So the Buddha has like the little headband and his hair is in the back and stuff like that. It's an interesting statue. Christine was in the retreat, and so she's saying, I just wanted to say I experienced the Justice Squirrel firsthand. Thank you for the teaching. So those of you who have heard me talk about fear and like my time staying out in the woods at night and trying to like conquer my fear and things like that. And also you might know the Majjhima Nikaya number 4, fear and dread. So in the Majjhima Nikaya number 4, the Buddha talks about how he decided to go into dark places at night to work with his fear and things like that. And he would say things like he heard noises and he would think it was this like giant like beast that was coming after him, but he would turn and it would just be a peacock. And I really connected with the sutta the first time I read it because, some of you might know I wanted to be like a survivalist. Like I've learned how to like live in the woods and like, start fires without like matches and things like that. And so me kind of like learning to be in the woods at night, like, was a progression that I practice. And I brought up the squirrel, like even like at Bhavana Society, when I would go up the mountain to the platforms on the mountain at night, and I'd be meditating and giving lots of metta out, to all the beings in the forest, and I would hear a noise, and it would sound like it was like a bear or something, and I'd turn around and it was a squirrel. Right? So you see that if you spend a lot of time in the wilderness, you see that it's often like our fears are very overblown. Right? We think it's some big beast. And me, like, honestly, I'm half, with my mind, I'm also like half ready to like think it's like Bigfoot or something too. In many ways, like my mind is worried about more mythological things in the woods than like bears and things like that, especially because I spent so much time in the woods. Animals don't bother humans really for the most part. But wait, oh, interesting. Oh, I don't know why this message was. Robert says, Ajahn Dick relayed this quote, a squirrel with the size 12 boots. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds about right. So that's I would be in on the platform and I'd be meditating and it would just be a squirrel and there would be so much fear and it would mostly just be over small things. I can remember, it was a full moon night and I was out there and I was meditating and I heard something and I went like this real quick and it was a deer and I scared the deer, like the deer went and just ran away. And I was like, oh, wait a second. Like I'm like the predator out here. Like I'm the one who's scaring beings out here, not the other way around. But it's a good lesson in life that, because we have, because our tendency, the mind's tendency is to go to the negative, then we're always going to have this kind of overblown negative. We're going to think that a situation is going to turn out more negative than it will actually turn out. Right? That's part of our ingrained tendency of the mind. And so when you really kind of put yourself out there and you test that and you really like check out your fears and see, then you realize, oh, okay, yeah, sure. There's things in the woods that can kill you. Sure. I can remember one night, this was years before I was a monk, when I was practicing gradually sleeping out in the woods without even a tent, just kind of just sleeping, with any being could just grab me and drag me out into the dark, like some horror movie. And I do remember one time vaguely waking up in the middle of the night and maybe something like the site, like Vermont is where I did a lot of this. And Vermont has like these wild dogs, like that are like mixes of dogs stray dogs and coyotes. They're called coy dogs, right? So I'm pretty sure one time I had one of those dogs like come right up to me, right? But it didn't do anything. It just kind of was probably just checking me out and just went away. But most of the time, you shouldn't say that there's things that are not out to get you. Of course, there's lots of ways. The Buddha in Mindfulness of Death #2, the Buddha wants us to reflect on when we wake up in the morning and when we go to bed at night. There's lots of ways that I can die. Everything from a scorpion bite to bad food that you eat to, a lion eating you or whatever, right? There's lots of ways you can die. But most of the time, that's not going to be what the case is. Most of the time, you're actually causing yourself more suffering and you're harming yourself from living life by fearing everything that might be. So this is the lesson of the squirrel, of the lesson of like things being amplified. And the Buddha says in Majjhima Nikaya #4, he'll say, he says after the peacock thing, he says, why does my mind always incline towards fear and dread? I love those suttas because it's so human. You can see the Buddha talking about how he was before he was awakened, and just the it's just so like, yes, exactly. I know exactly what he's talking about in there. All right, so we have some chat stuff here. So Steve asked what the squirrel is. So I just said about the squirrel. There you go. Steve says, I enjoyed your talk about the nature of fear on Insight Timer. Yeah. If you heard the talk on Insight Timer, you basically heard everything I'm going to say. That's pretty much. Oh, also next Saturday, 2 p.m. Insight Timer session. So those of you who use Insight Timer, I'm going to do an 1.5-hour session on the divine messengers. Insight Timer is interesting because I got the last 2 Insight Timer sessions I did. I got like 65 people. Like that's the biggest anything online I've ever done. I mean, I've done like in person, like auditoriums and things like that with like 100 people, but like on terms of online, that was definitely like the biggest. It was quite interesting, and it's a different market too, because it's a lot of people who aren't Buddhist. So I like kind of hitting those markets of people who kind of might be by seeing me or other monks. There's a couple monks on there, but mostly it's a bunch of wacky lay teachers. But all right. So Insight Timer next Saturday, 2 p.m. Eastern. Hello, Ethan. Welcome. Happy Visakha. Bhavani. Welcome, Bhavani. Bhavani, I love that you put the big red question on there. It makes it so much easier to see a question in the chat. Do people come together as family members and relatives due to karma? They did know each other or among them. Thank you. Well, yes, this is definitely a thing. Especially you see like, not in the early text, but in the later works where they'll actually like there's a great book by Helmut. It's from the earlier in the last century. It's called The Great Disciples of the Buddha. And it tells you like the stories of like Mahakassapa and things. And like it'll tell you like one life, the Buddha was the mother and Sariputta was the father and Mahamoggallana was the son. And then the next life, the Buddha was the son. And then, and so you see that. And it also goes along with the whole thing of the Buddha says, you'd be hard pressed to find anybody who was not your mother or your father in a past life. So there's basically any being that you meet, you have a connection to in some way or another in past lives. That's how it goes. And the Buddha is asked by, this married couple. Of course, I know I've been in love. I know how it is. And like, there's a strong attachment. And you're just like, I want to live on with my loved one throughout the ages. Like how can we live and be born again and again and be together? And so the Buddha said, well, if you practice lots of Dhamma together, then you can come back together. The only thing is he doesn't say like, but like next life, like one of you might be human and the other one might be like your pet dog. Or one of you might be the mother and one of you might be the daughter. It's like people like want to have this connection of like, this is my family and we can be exactly how we are in future lives, but that's not how it works. Even the people are connected to other beings so much to the point where even if they're not the same, just to know like, I will see you again across the ages. Just like even that kind of connection, is something that we really like and we really kind of attach to and feel to. Like most of like I was married when I was young and she died of cancer and stuff like that. And I remember as I was becoming a Buddhist and I would think about that and I thought, you know what? I've already kind of let her go. I've gone through the process, but as a Buddhist, I have to reflect on she's a being in samsara. So it's like I reflect. I remember one time saying like, may this being eventually be able to be born to hear the Dhamma, and may they, become awakened and end their samsaric journey. Right? That's like the real, like the Buddhist thing is this, not to be attached to them, but to just wish, wish that they will throughout their lives in samsara, they will eventually become free. I can remember there was a very senior monk, was his mother died, and Bhante Ji was actually, I don't think Bhante Ji ordained this very senior monk, but has known him since he was a child. Right, so this very senior monk, Bhante Uparatana, and his mother died, and Bhante Ji gave the talk. And Bhante Ji is like as a Westerner, you go to like a funeral and like you kind of expect a certain talk. You kind of expect like a certain way, like people are going to talk. And Bhante Ji's like, yes, and she's a being in samsara, and we may or may not have contact with her ever again. And like he was just like totally like straight, like straight Dhamma, no like pleasant pleasantries or something. It was like, this is really neat. I really like this. This is kind of interesting. My mom has been in the hospital a lot last couple of weeks, and actually she's in a rehab right now, like for like because she like really like lost a lot of weight, and she has to learn how to kind of like walk again and eat again and all these kind of things. So she's in this like center right now, and she's like 72, and I've started to think it's like, oh yeah, this is, she's coming to the age where she's, who knows how much time is left. Right? And I have to reflect on this person who brought me into the world, who has lost so much weight and looks so different, reflecting on that, and it's like, oh yes, yeah, see, this is a divine messenger, observing our loved ones getting old, getting sick, and then eventually death. And the same thing with you, getting old, getting sick, and eventually death. Right? These are always wonderful things. So, will you have connections with people? Sure. But you don't know, you shouldn't expect that it's going to be exactly how you would like it to be. That's all. Right? Because it's always going to be different. Anicca makes that how it is. It's always going to be different. The most wonderful thing you can do for a being in samsara is to wish and to give them good thoughts that they will become awakened. And I've even had thoughts of like, maybe my wife is born again as a human and I'll be able to teach her Dhamma or something like that, right? Like, you think of like, when you think about it in that way, there's no attachment. Like she could be like like a 15-year-old boy right now, right? It's the so maybe it's the same being, but it's not the being that I knew, right? And had an attachment with. But still I can wish, well, maybe may this being hear the Dhamma, may they be able to attain freedom from suffering. One thing I will say though is I do feel the Chinese have an interesting term called comic affinity, and I do have like an interesting. There's some people I meet, and I feel a connection with them. Like I feel like I've known them for a long, long time, and it's a hard thing to explain. It only happens. It doesn't happen that often, but I've come to understand that what that experience is that experience is me knowing them from past lives. Like that's what that experience is. Like this is like I know this person um, before this life in some way or another. Like you know, could it be explained in some other way? Maybe. I mean, I'm always open to like, yeah, no, this is stupid. This is just your mind scientifically, blah blah blah. I'm open to that being explained, but there's just some people that I meet, and I was like, yeah, I have a comic affinity to this person. Like, there's definitely this connection that I can feel. Just like I can actually feel my attachment to things and to people. Like it's almost like I visualize it as this like this band, like like gum that's like stretched out. Like, and I have this band that's like that connects me and another person. Like it's almost like I can like feel and understand this like attachment that I have. And it's that band that causes me suffering, as the Buddha tells us. Even that I have a band to my Yeti mic that I like, my nice microphone. I have a band to my laptop that I can feel it. And I know if my laptop breaks one day, I'll feel, oh man, my laptop. I like this laptop. I can edit videos and do all kinds of things on it. Right? So when you practice and you start to see things, you can understand things in this way. All the ways you attach and connect to things. Steve says, I'm planning to have a simple meditation cabin kuti put in a wild and woolly corner of our garden. So I'm looking forward to contemplating this. Yeah. Having a nice, even if, if you live in the suburbs or whatever, if you can make a nice little kuti away from the house, a little man cave or woman cave or whatever, as they say in modern parlance, to get away from things, that's a good thing. PGS is saying, question, would Bhante please talk about how was dealing with friends and family when you shared with them your resolve to take the monastic path? All right. So, I'm a Italian, a very close Italian family, and of course, a bit of a mama's boy. So the first person I said that, hey, I think I want to become a monastic is my mother. This was like 4 years before I actually went, because it was a long process for me. I had a career, I had my own business, I had, car payments and stuff. Like, it wasn't just going to be like, I'm just going to drop everything and become a monastic. But, I was raised Catholic, and I was an altar boy and all that stuff. And, and there was even maybe a period of time in my like preteen, adolescent, like 12, 13-ish, where I thought maybe about the possibility of becoming a Catholic priest. And so I went to my mom, this is 2010. 2010 is about when I started to think that like the monastic life would be for me, or at least that I should try and see how it works. And 2014 at the end is when I moved to Bhavana to become a monastic. But so I went up to my mom and I said, Mom, do you remember when I wanted to be a Catholic priest? What about a Buddhist monk? And she looked at me kind of like, and she just laughed, and that was it. That was, so it wasn't like, my family, I don't think took seriously that I was actually going to leave until like 3 weeks before, when I resigned from my career. Like when I had to put in my resignation paperwork for the state. And like, oh, actually, he is leaving. It was very, very hard um, on my family that I left. And it was hard for me too, especially, I had lived with and helped raise my nephew from the time he was 1 to the time he was 10 when I left. So, I mean, I kind of left this, I was like, the father figure / cool uncle for my nephew. And I was like 10 years old. I'm like, peace out. I'm going to become a monk. Like that's a hard thing for a 10-year-old to have to deal with, you know. But I mean, I started losing my grandparents when I was like 9. So me becoming a monk is not as bad as people dying around you. So, but no, so it wasn't, I had been a Buddhist a couple years by that point, like 3 years. And, as a Buddhist, I never really like, me becoming a Buddhist didn't impact my family in any way. Like I never tried to impose anything on them. Um, I mean, like it never was like, okay, some people are like, it was like, oh, we're going to say grace. And like, oh, well, we should also say a Buddhist prayer at the, like, I was never, that's not me. I'm not into this. Like, I do my own thing. And so I'm around my family. So like me becoming a Buddhist didn't impact my family at all. Nothing changed with my family. I even still went to church with my mom every once in a while, Christmas, Easter stuff. Like, well, sure, why not? Even as a monk, I've been to church. I've been in Catholic church with my monk's robes. Doesn't bother me. But so my family wasn't really like violently against me becoming a monk. I was already older. I mean, I moved to the monastery when I was 36. So it wasn't like, and it was a sadness. I'm the oldest and I'm the only boy. In an Italian family, that means a lot. The oldest and a boy, that's like kind of like, oh, like that, that's the person who's going to take over the family, right? They're gonna keep the family going. That's like, yeah, about that. Sorry, peace out. So, so it was a lot of sadness. But over time, they see that I love what I'm doing, that I'm helping people, and they've had good experiences, and it's become very like positive. And also, I get, they kind of also, when I left, I told them I'm not going to maybe I'll see them like once or twice a year, or like it was going to be like a real separation. But life turned out differently. Like I've seen them a lot in the, since I've become a monk. I've seen, when I was at Bhavana in the early days, I was seeing them maybe once or twice a year. But then as I started getting invited to teach, like when I would come to Buddhist Insights, when they were in New York City, I'd see my family like 3 times a year because I was coming to New York 3 times a year. And so I got to see, and then I was being invited to teach at colleges in New Jersey. And, so they got to see me a lot more than was expected. And I think that helped a lot. So one thing that I like to tell this story, especially to Buddhist people because they enjoy it. But my mom, right, again, born in Italy, Roman Catholic, that's her thing. She's a very, very Catholic person. She started having this series of experiences. Like for one of my sisters, either my sister's or my sister's friend, I don't remember what it was, like a wedding or something was happening. And so my mom went with my sisters to like get their nails done or the hair for the event. I was a monk. I didn't I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was, it was the stereotypical like hair nail salon, and it's Thai women, right? And so once the Thai women found out that my mom was the mom of a monk, they were like, ah, and they like, like treated her like a queen. And she's like, oh, this is kind of right. So like that was the first experience of like, whoa, like, my son being a monk actually means something to some people. Like, this is like, and then she ended up going to another doctor. She's a cancer survivor from years ago. She has a lot of like IBD, like stomach issues. So she's been, the last half of her life, she's seen a lot of doctors. And so one of her new doctors was Indian. And again, when she found out, like, oh yeah, my son's a Buddhist monk, you know, Indian people, even if they're not Buddhists, it doesn't matter. Indian people have large respect for what they call sadhus, whether it's Buddhist, Hindu, Jain, it doesn't matter, right? They're very, this is where the Buddhist culture comes from, right? Ancient India. And you see that in the suttas. You can see the same thing. And then the last one that I heard was my mom and dad were in a Whole Foods in New Jersey, and my mom saw a Tibetan bhikkhuni, and this was, I had been a monk a couple of years by this point, so she's like, I think this is a monastic. So she went up to her and said, "Are you a Buddhist monk?" And she's like, "Yes, I am." And they started talking. Well, it turns out that this Tibetan bhikkhuni has subscribed to me on YouTube and watches my videos. Right. So my mom not only was able to meet a monastic in the wild, as it were, but a monastic that knew me and liked my videos and, and such like that. So that was like another thing that was like, whoa, like, Joe, that's my given name, Giuseppe. That's what my grandparents from Italy, that's what they would say, Giuseppe. But so she's like, oh, Joe is like, people know him, and they like, and she also has been on my YouTube channel and watched some of my videos and things like that too. So so it's a positive thing now. Steve is asking, chat's a little quiet today. Well, that's fine. Either it's quiet or something's going on with the internet. I guess I'm still on, but Steve says, any hints or tips about Cooties? I was very inspired by your forest retreat a few months back. I'm going to keep it all small and simple. Douse. Yes. Okay. Everything's good, Douse. So, no, Cooties are just basically a square box of wood. I mean, that's basically what a Cootie is. You know, I don't really have any tips on it. It's like whatever you want to do with it, really. I mean, in terms of like heating or air or anything like that, I don't know. It's up to you what you want to do. If you want to go all out, you could get like a wood stove. Keep yourself alive in the winter, hanging out there with the wood stove going. Don't put any electricity in it. You can use an oil lamp right by oil lamp fire, like your, Thomas Jefferson or something. Somebody in the 1700s. That's what I did at Bhavana. I loved it. When I lived in the Kuti for 2.5 years, and I kept myself alive with the wood, right? And like you had to. There wasn't like, okay, I'm just going to turn on the heat. It was like, I actually have to process this wood. Even if you're tired, like, no, like, it's going to be like 19 degrees out. I need to make sure there's enough wood, right? So like that kind of stuff. It's quite fun. I enjoy that. I always said like, growing up, like, as an adult, like, through the whole survivalist phase, like I always wanted to retire to a cabin in the woods. And I said, I'm at Bob and I'm like, wow, I did this like 30 years early. This is great. And I'm hoping, with Colorado and stuff, I'm hoping that if Colorado works out or wherever I end up, I get a forest monastery set up in the mountains, and that's where I'm going to die. Like, get a nice kuti out there, be in the mountains and like live the rest of my life out there. Like, that's what I want. I'm a forest. I'm a mountain guy. As a nomad, I'm staying in society a lot, but I like to be in places that are away, but also close enough to society to come in for the weekend, do Dhamma talks. And I always say, I'm, a big fan of that Elon Musk Starlink stuff, because then I can be in the middle of nowhere and also do good live streams. Because mountain internet is horrible. It's not good. I never did Dhammapaloozas at Bhavana Society. Dhammapalooza started Dhammapalooza started at the beginning of the pandemic when I left. So this Dhammapalooza, this would not work at Bhavana Society. You can look at Bhante G's Zoom live streams, and it's like very like you can hear him talk, but that's because mountain internet is bad. So, but anyway, all right. So we're at 8:50, and there's no question. So let's read a sutta. I think we can read a sutta since the chat is quiet here. But Bhavani does have a comment. When I visited Bodh Gaya 3 years back, my eyes dwelled with tears continuously in the airport and under Bodhi tree. I am wondering why it was so. Thank you. Well, I'm going to say it's because it holds meaning to you. As a religious place, as an ancient place, as a place like, I love history. So like when I'm in a place where ancient people dwelled, like for instance, when I went to Italy in 2001 and I got to stand in the Forum and I got to go into the Colosseum, it's just like I could feel history there. Like it's just such a profound thing. I could feel history. When I went to Machu Picchu in Peru, I could feel history. I could actually feel energy. That's the only place any place I've ever been in the world where I felt some kind of energy. It's a real interesting place, Machu Picchu in Peru. But yeah, like, I can imagine if I when I, eventually go to India to go to the holy, go on the pilgrimage, when I'm in like Bodh Gaya, like, or when I get to go to a place like at Savatthi or whatever, I'm like, this is where the Buddha, like, maybe not exactly in this spot, but like the Buddha is here. Like, like the Mahakassapa and Sariputta and Mahamoggallana, they walked here. Bhikkhuni Patachara, Bhikkhuni Kisagotami, they walked here. Right? Like for me, as somebody who loves history, who feels history like that, I can understand that because that's how I'd feel. There's no doubt. When I go to India, I want to see all the ancient places. That's what I like. Oh, Elaine is here. Hey, Elaine, welcome. Elaine, I think I might have your Pali name. And it's actually, I think it's a very good Pali name for you. I'm still kind of looking at all the other names just in case, but I think I might have your name. So I think within the next week, I'll make sure that you have your name. All right, friends, let's read a sutta. So we are going to read Majjhima Nikaya, number 44. It's not too long. And as you all know, if you do have any questions or anything, you can keep putting those in the chat and I'll address them after. But there's the link in the chat if you want to follow along. This is called the shorter classification. Let me get the Pali up here. Which translation is this? Yeah, Chula Vidala Sutta. All right. I'm just putting this in another browser so I can continue to see the chat. All right. What is going? Oh, not that. The internet's being a little slow. All right, here we go. What is going on?
It's up there too in case.
Technically, I could just read from the read from that. No, I thankfully my okay. This is just weird. Anyway, I'm gonna give up on that. Some weirdness happening. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, the squirrel's feeding ground. So, Rupa, do they know where Rajagaha is in India? Maybe I can visit there when I go to India. Then the layman Visakha went to the nun Dhammapalooza, bowed, sat down to one side, and said to her, "Now this is one of the few suttas where the main teacher is a bhikkhuni, and we have a layman coming to the bhikkhuni, and I believe it says it's her former husband, right? So the husband is going to his former wife for some Dhamma lessons. Ma'am, they speak of this thing called identity. What is this identity that the Buddha spoke of? Visakha, the Buddha said that these 5 grasping aggregates are identity. That is form, feeling, perception, choices, and consciousness. The Buddha has said that these 5 grasping aggregates are identity. Now, I love to point out what also does the Buddha call the 5 grasping aggregates? Anybody in the chat know? Do you know?
I mean, well, you know me. I know there's a sutta where he says that they're marked.
Ethan comes in right with it. Yes, Dukkha.
Oh.
Right? What is Dukkha? Birth, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, not getting worse. In short, the 5 grasping aggregates are Dukkha. So the Buddha, in many places, is telling you that literally the fact that you have created an identity is the root of your suffering. Right? When you let go of the identity, you're letting go of your dukkha. Right? So this is identity. Identity is dukkha. Identity is suffering. Right? This is a very interesting thing, isn't it? Saying, good ma'am, Visakha approved and agreed with. So most of you might know Visakha as the one of the foremost laywoman disciple of the Buddha. But this is a good Pali lesson for you here. There's Visakha and Visakha. Those of you who are English speakers like me, like it's hard to hear that difference. But Visakha is male, Visakha is female. So that's the difference there. Visakha. This is Visakha. Ma'am, they speak of this thing, the origin of identity. What is the origin of identity that the Buddha has spoken of? It's the craving that leads to future rebirth, mixed up with relishing in greed, taking pleasure in various different realms. That is, craving for sensual pleasures, craving to continue existence, and craving to end existence. The Buddha said that this is the origin of identity. Ma'am, they speak of this thing called the cessation of identity. What is the cessation of identity that the Buddha spoke of? It's the fading away and cessation of that very same craving with nothing left over, giving it away, letting it go, releasing it, and not adhering to it. The Buddha said that this is the cessation of identity. Ma'am, they speak of the practice that leads to the cessation of identity. What is the practice that leads to the cessation of identity that the Buddha spoke of? The fourth noble truth. The noble truth that ends dukkha. Identity is dukkha. The practice that leads to the cessation of identity that the Buddha spoke of is simply this noble eightfold path. That is right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right immersion. But ma'am, is that grasping the exact same thing as the 5 grasping aggregates? Or is grasping one thing and the 5 grasping aggregates another? Who's ringing the bell at this point in night? Interesting. But anyway, okay, so where was I here? Grasping. That grasping is not the exact same thing as the 5 grasping aggregates, nor is grasping one thing and the 5 aggregates grasping another. The desire and greed for the 5 grasping aggregates is grasping there. But ma'am, how does identity view come about? It's when the patujana, that's us. Anybody who's not part of the Arya Sangha is a patujana. Yes, even me. And most monastics who aren't part of the Arya Sangha. But it's when, now Bhante Sujato has this translated as an uneducated ordinary person. I don't like some other people have translated it as related to uneducated. It's not really what this is meaning is you're not educated in the teachings of the Dhamma. That's what this means, right? Because somebody who is, not very like intellectually high educated kind of person can still be very wise and can know Dhamma very well. So this is why it's important to understand what this is meaning here. So this person has not seen the noble ones and is neither skilled nor trained in the teaching of the noble ones. They've not seen good persons, and they are neither skilled nor trained in the teaching of good persons. They regard form as self. Problem number 1. Self is having form. Form in self or self in form. This body is me. This body is self. And this self has form, this body. Myself is in this form. Right? In the ancient Brahmanic tradition, the Atman is the being that goes in the body. So self is in the body. And it comes out when you die or when you go to sleep. Right? Or self in form. They regard feeling, perception, choices, consciousness as self. Self as having consciousness, consciousness in self, or self in consciousness. That's how identity view comes about. So you take these 5 aggregates and you create a character. Many of you already know, I talk about this all the time as a former video gamer and who loved to play with role-playing games and create characters, Dungeons and Dragons, even before video games, right? And I create a character. My character is a elven wizard or whatever, right? And so we're born into the world, and like I'm born into the world, and I'm, Joseph, and my parents are Italian, and I grew up in New Jersey, and I'm Catholic. So I'm given like these kind of starting stats, right? And then once I'm old enough, I start to add to those and create my own character of who Joseph is, right? Joseph likes this. He doesn't like that. He's interested in this. He's not interested in that. Building up this character. One of my favorite Pali words is manyati. right? It's talking about the mind. It's talking about creation in the mind. One of the ways you can translate manyati is imagination. So as you're creating this being, creating this identity out of what is simply the processes, is simply the five aggregates. Right? So this is something that the Buddha, this is anatta. This is how we are to understand this. That we take what are simply processes, that are simply causes and conditions, dependent origination, things that are arising dependent on causes, and we add a self to those things. Now here we go. But ma'am, how does identity view not come about? Now let me check the chat just in case anybody's asking questions. Oh, okay, Douse. Douse is making a comment about somebody getting mad. Why are we called uneducated? Because educated here means wisdom, not book learning. I know people with multiple PhDs, and they're the most unwise people I've ever met in my life. And I've met some plumbers who are pretty wise people. You know, wisdom and intelligence are not the same. Having both is the best. Being very intelligent and very wise, that's definitely the best. But just because you have one doesn't mean you have the other. Hassan, very good question. Bante, can you please elaborate on vibhavatanha? Is it referring to suicide? So this is one of those that is interpreted in many different ways because it's not very clear in the suttas. This is what bhava means: existing, re-existence, re-becoming, right? To become. So what you're wishing here, this is a desire to not exist again. It could be in this life, it could be so like the way I look at it is this. It could be, yes, suicide. Could you imagine, is there something more miserable in the world than being in such a place where you feel that the best thing for you to do is to commit suicide? But in reality, there's multiple lives, so you're stuck in samsara more. Like that sounds like some kind of like a Twilight Zone episode. Or there's this thing called Black Mirror now people tell me about. That's kind of like the new Twilight Zone where it's really like these kind of horrible things, right? So like that sounds horrible, right? So could you imagine that? That's such a miserable thing. But also, though, I think that somebody who is wanting to follow the Noble Eightfold Path to end their samsaric journey, there's also some vibhavatanha there as well, right? You don't want to be born again and again in samsara continuously. You want to cut that cycle down, right? So I think the way I look at it is it can be seen, it can be skillful and it can be unskillful, right? Like in the suttas where Ananda is asked, is there such a thing as a skillful craving? And Ananda says, yes, the craving that leads to the ending of all craving, right? So if you have that vibhavatanha and it's a skillful one that is helping you develop the path, then that's a good thing. It could also be unskillful.
Is it ever related to the seventh fetter, like the fetter of becoming and the fetter of non-becoming?
No. Well, 6 and 7. Yeah, Rupa Tanha, Arupa Tanha.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is it ever related to the Arupa Tanha?
I would say that. Well, yeah. So what it is Arupa is craving to be in a form. So like craving to be like a human. Arupa would be like craving to be like a deva. So yeah, I mean that would be connected.
Like an immaterial deva.
Yeah.
Because I've asked that question as well, and it's weird. Yeah, there isn't a lot of stuff.
Mhm. Yeah. All right, let's continue with the sutta. So, how does identity view not come about? When a noble disciple has seen the noble ones and is skilled and trained in their teaching of the noble ones, they've seen good persons. Sapurisa Dhamma. Sapurisa is a person who is very, very good, wise person. The Sapurisa is the person who you want to be your Kalyanamita. This is a very wise, skillful person. That's what they mean here. And are skilled and trained in the teaching of good persons. They don't regard form as self, self as having form, form and self, or self and form. They don't regard feeling, perception, choices, consciousness as self, self as having consciousness, consciousness in self, or self in consciousness. That's how identity view does not come about. But ma'am, what is the Noble Eightfold Path? Simply this Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right immersion. But ma'am, is the Noble Eightfold Path conditioned or unconditioned? The Noble Eightfold Path is conditioned. Here's a cheat sheet for you. You don't need to ever ask if is this conditioned or that is conditioned. There's only one thing that's unconditioned, and that's why it's called the unconditioned. That's Nibbana. Everything else is conditioned. Your metta is conditioned, right? Your meditation is conditioned. You can enjoy meditation. It's going to be nice for a couple times, and then it's going to change, right? You're going to go through period of years where your metta is blissful and powerful like me, and then it's going to change, and you're going to suffer because of it like I did. Right? That's how it goes. Everything is conditioned except for Nibbana. So yes, the Noble Eightfold Path is conditioned. Are the three practice categories included in the Noble Eightfold Path? Or is the Noble Eightfold Path included in the three practice categories? Those of you who were at the retreat this weekend, we went over these three things. What are the three categories? The three practice categories are not included in the Noble Eightfold Path. Rather, the Noble Eightfold Path is included in the three practice categories. Right speech, right action, and right livelihood. These are included in the category of Sila. Right effort, right mindfulness, and right immersion. These things are included in the category of immersion. Samadhi. Right view, right thought. These things are included in the category of wisdom, Panya. So you've maybe heard that the Noble Eightfold Path is divided into these three things, Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. But ma'am, what is Samadhi? What's immersion? What things are the foundations of immersion? What things are the prerequisite for immersion? What is the development of immersion? Unification of mind is immersion. Unification of mind, samadhi, that's developing a mind of samatha. You follow the breath, and as you follow the breath and you get distracted, you keep coming back to the breath. Distracted, you keep coming back. And as you do that, your mind is starting to become calm. And your mind is starting to spend more time on the breath until the breath is just so good and so chill that there could be a fire going on around you. And you're just like, whatever, I'm here with the breath. This is the best. Right? So that's like unification, right? What is immersion? Unification. Where am I here? Unification of mind is immersion. The four kinds of mindfulness meditation are the foundations of immersion. Here, again, multiple places in the suttas, the Buddha is saying the foundations for jhana, foundations for deep samadhi is satipatthana. It's not a coincidence that satipatthana is the seventh factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. Then jhana is the eighth factor, right? And jhana is the eighth factor supported by all the other factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. We've up to 16 people. So welcome. The chat is quiet, but so welcome those who've joined. We are reading through a sutta here. Should find it in the chat. We're on Majjhima Nikaya number 44, about halfway through, which is good because once we're finished with that, we're going to do our meditation and then we're going to call it a night. All right, so let's go back to the suttas. The 4 right efforts are the prerequisite for immersion. So also right effort is prerequisite for samadhi. That's the 6th factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. The cultivation, development, and making much of these very same things is the development of immersion. How many processes are there? There are 3 processes: physical, verbal, and mental. But ma'am, what is the physical process? What's the verbal process, and what's the mental process? Breathing is a physical process. Placing the mind and keeping it connected are verbal processes. Perception and feeling are mental processes. But ma'am, why is breathing a physical process? Why are placing the mind and keeping it connected verbal processes, and why is our perception and feeling mental processes? Breathing is physical. So in the Anapanasati Sutta, the Buddha says, the breath is a body among the bodies. That's why in Anapanasati, there's this debate between the fourth of the 16 steps, where some people say this means that you tranquilize, you focus on the whole body, and other people say, no, it's talking about the whole breath. Right? And I fall, after years of trying it out myself and reading the suttas and studying, I fall in the camp of they're talking about the whole breath, because it fits within the context of the teaching there. But anyway, just so that you know, there is a debate between that, there are in many other places in the teachings here. All right. So breathing is a physical process. Let me see here. Breathing is physical. It's tied up with the body. That's why breathing is a physical process. First, you place the mind and keep it connected. Then you break into speech. That's why placing the mind and keeping it connected are verbal processes. Perception and feeling are mental. They're tied up with the mind. That's why perception and feeling are mental processes. But ma'am, how does someone attain the cessation of perception and feeling? So the cessation of perception and feeling, if I'm not mistaken, I could be mistaken. There's a arupa attainment that only awakened beings can attain. And I'm pretty sure it's the cessation of perception and feeling. But I could be wrong. Sometimes I mix it up. It's only in a couple places in the suttas. It's a very, it's not something that's very common. But so a mendicant who has entered such an attainment does not think, I will enter the cessation of perception and feeling, or I am entering the cessation of perception and feeling, or I have entered the cessation of perception and feeling. Rather, their mind has been previously developed as to lead to such a state. So there it is. Yes. So yeah, the mind just can naturally go into that as an awakened being. But ma'am, which cease first for a mendicant who is entering in the cessation of perception and feeling? Physical, verbal, or mental processes? Verbal processes cease first, then physical, then mental. But ma'am, how does someone emerge from the cessation of perception and feeling? A mendicant who is emerging from such an attainment does not think, I will emerge from the cessation of perception and feeling, or I am emerging from the cessation of perception and feeling, or I have emerged from the cessation of perception and feeling. Rather, their mind has been previously developed so as to lead to such a state. But ma'am, which arises first from a mendicant who is emerging from the cessation of perception and feeling, physical, verbal, or mental? Mental processes arise first, then physical, then verbal. But ma'am, when a mendicant has emerged from the attainment of cessation and perception of feeling, how many kinds of contact do they experience? They experience three kinds of contact: emptiness, signless, and undirected contacts. Very interesting. And I don't know if I have anything off the top of my head to actually explain those two. I'm sure there's a Bhikkhu Bodhi commentary that he explains it. But ma'am, when a mendicant has emerged from the attainment of cessation and perception and feeling, what does their mind slant, slope, and incline to? Their mind slants, slopes, and inclines towards seclusion. But ma'am, how many feelings are there? Let me check the chat. Ethan is saying, I've heard it's non-returner and above for cessation of perception and feeling. Maybe, Ethan, you might be right. Honestly, off the top of my head, this is not a specific topic that I have a lot of familiarity with. I think it's also the absorption where people mistakenly think the meditator is dead. Possibly. Possibly. All right. There are three feelings: pleasant, painful, and neutral feelings. What are these feelings? Anything felt physically or mentally as pleasant or enjoyable, this is a pleasant feeling. Anything felt physically or mentally as painful or unpleasant, this is a painful feeling. Anything felt physically or mentally as neither painful nor pleasant, this is a neutral feeling. So this is important to understand when we talk about Vedana. So like in Satipatthana, the Pali words are niramisa, so aramisa, niramisa. I believe that those are the Pali words. And this means carnal and non-carnal. So when we modern English speakers, when we hear carnal, we think of like sexual stuff, but that simply means of the body and not of the body. So this is feeling covers painful, pleasant, neutral feelings of the body, painful, pleasant, neutral feelings of the mind. So anything felt physically or mentally as neither pleasurable nor painful, this is a neutral feeling. What is pleasant and what is painful in each of the three feelings? Pleasant feeling is pleasant when it remains, and painful when it perishes. Okay, so when a pleasant feeling goes away, when we finished our cigarette, we finished eating the good food, or we finished our sexual experience or whatever, right? And then it's over and it's like, right? We had this wonderful, pleasant experience. I had a nice croissant, and now the croissant's being digested and it's over. So I want another croissant. So it's painful when it perishes. Painful feeling is painful when it remains, and pleasant when it perishes. Neutral feeling is pleasant when there is knowledge, and painful when there is ignorance. What underlying tendencies underlie the three feelings? This is important. This is those of you who hear me talk about the Salla Sutta, the simile of the arrow. The Buddha tells us what our underlying tendency is, and here we see it again. The underlying tendency for greed underlies pleasant feeling. We have pleasant feeling, we want more of it, we want to hold on to it, and if it escapes, we want to chase after it for more. Right? So that's our underlying pleasant feeling. When we have pleasant feeling, that's our tendency. That's our habit. Our anusaya, underlying habitual tendency. The underlying tendency for repulsion underlies painful feeling. Painful feeling, push it away, run away from it, avoid it, whatever we need to do. The underlying tendency for ignorance underlies neutral feeling. Why? Because neutral feeling is feeling that we don't pay attention to. And there's a reason why certain feelings are what we focus on in certain meditative practices, like mindfulness of breathing. Breathing is a neutral feeling. Unless there's some kind of problem with our breathing, body just breathes. We're not even paying attention to it. It's just breathing, right? When you're walking, when you do walking meditation, you pay attention to the feeling of the feet. Why? Because it's a neutral feeling. Unless you step on a nail or something, most people are not paying attention to the feeling of the feet walking in their day-to-day, right? So ignorance is there because we're not paying attention. That's why when we pay attention to our breath and to our feet, we meditate, we gain insight. Do these underlying tendencies are, so we're coming close to 9:30 and we're coming close to the end. So I'm going to start moving a little bit faster through this sutta so we can get our meditation in. Do these underlying tendencies always underlie these feelings? No, they do not. What should be given up in regard to each of these feelings? The underlying tendency to greed should be given up. The underlying tendency to repulsion should be given up. And the underlying tendency to ignorance should be given up. Should these underlying tendencies be given up in regarding to all instances of these feelings? No, not in all instances. So, if you have a pleasant feeling, but there's some pleasant feelings that shouldn't be given up. And here's going to be an example. Take a mendicant who, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, so this is jhana. So take a mendicant who's in jhana. With this, they give up greed, and the underlying tendency to greed does not lie within them that. And take a mendicant who reflects, oh, when will I enter and remain in the same dimension that the noble ones enter and remain in today? Nursing such longing for the supreme liberations gives rise to sadness due to longing. With this, they give up repulsion, and the underlying tendency to repulsion does not lie within them. Take a mendicant who, giving up pleasure and pain, and in ending former happiness and sadness, enter and remains in the fourth jhana. With this, they give up ignorance, and underlying tendency to ignorance does not lie within them. But man, what is the counterpart of pleasant feeling? Painful feeling. What is the counterpart of painful? Pleasant feeling. What is the counterpart of neutral feeling? Ignorance. What is the counterpart of ignorance? Knowledge. What is the counterpart of knowledge? Freedom. What is the counterpart of freedom? Extinguishment. So those of you in the retreat this weekend know that I talk about how the Noble Eightfold Path turns into the Noble Tenfold Path, what Bhante Ji calls the upper middle path. Right? When you have developed the Noble Eightfold Path, it turns into the tenfold. Number 9, right knowledge. Number 10, right liberation. So we see here knowledge and freedom, and then that leads to extinguishment. What is the counterpart of extinguishment? Your question goes too far, Visakha. You couldn't figure out the limit of questions. For extinguishment is the culmination, destination, and end of the spiritual life. If you wish, go to the Buddha and ask him this question. You should remember it in line with his answer. Then the layman Visakha approved and agreed with what the nun Dhammadinna said. He got up from his seat, bowed, and respectfully circled her, keeping her on his right. Then he went to the Buddha, sat down on side and informed the Buddha all they discussed. When he had spoken, the Buddha said to him, the nun Dhammadinna is astute, Visakha. She has great wisdom. If you came to me and asked this question, I would answer in the exact same way as the nun Dhammadinna. That is what it means, and that is how you should remember it. That is what the Buddha said. Satisfied, the layman Visakha was happy with what the Buddha said. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right, friends. So let's check the chat here. Das has a comment here. Neutral feeling is pleasant when there is knowledge, and painful is when there is ignorance. It's like if someone is like, I want to feel alive. This is boring. I want to feel bliss. Yeah, kind of. All right. So, friends, we are at a half hour left. Let's do so we have 16 people. Adriana is not on with us, so I can't make the joke with Adriana. But the joke is always that as soon as we start the meditation, we lose at least half the people on the stream. Douse and other people in various parts of the world who it's really, really late. That's okay. But don't run away from meditation. All right. Do I We don't have a bell here, do we? All right, it's okay. Just leave it for now. All right, friends. So put yourself in whatever posture works for you, in a stable and comfortable position. We'll spend a little bit of time scanning through the body. We do this for two reasons. The first is to help our mind gradually move from the external to the internal. And the second is to be able to observe the body and set the body up in a posture that will be stable and lead to less pain and discomfort as time goes on in the meditation. So bring your awareness to your feet. By bring awareness, this means to try to be aware, come into contact with any sensation or feeling that may arise. What is the feeling of the feet pressing against the floor or the cushion? Try to observe and investigate that feeling. You can observe how the placement of the feet impacts your posture. We'll go through the same process for each part of the body as we move up. Move your awareness up through the ankles, into the calves. What is the feeling of the calves pressing against the floor or the back of a chair? Moving up to the knees. The placement of the knees has a huge impact on the overall stability of your posture. Ideally, the knees should be pressing against the ground, but for most of us that might not be possible. So sometimes people put cushions under the knees. But whenever you scan through the body, observe the knees as an important part of the body to check for posture. Bring your awareness up through the thighs. If you're ever having trouble coming into contact with any sensation in whatever part of the body you're investigating, you can prompt yourself by asking, what do I see? What do I feel? Bring your awareness to the hips and pelvis. The position of the pelvic bone impacts the legs and the lower body, but also impacts the spine. So become very aware of how the pelvis and buttocks are positioned. If you're sitting on a cushion, it's always important to have the sits bones of the buttocks evenly distributed on the cushion. Even a little imbalance can cause lots of havoc after 30 minutes of sitting. Pay attention to these little things. Bring your awareness up through the spine, through the abdomen and the chest. Check that the spine is in its neutral position, not bending left or right, backwards or forwards, causing you to slouch and lean. Think of your posture, the body, like a house. The lower part of the body is the firm foundation upon which the top rests. Each level resting on top of the one below and being rested upon by the level above. Bring your awareness to your shoulders. Check to make sure they're hanging loosely, not scrunched up tight. And then down through to the elbows and hands. Observe how the position of the elbows and hands impacts your posture as well. It can cause the upper body to bend and lean. And finally, bring your awareness to your head, checking that the chin is parallel to the floor. The head's not leaning and slouching here and there. And once you've set your body up in a comfortable and stable position, let the body go and take 3 deep breaths. And then let the breath go. From here on in, try not to manipulate or control the breath in any way. This body has been breathing from the moment you were born. and will continue to do so until the second you die. It doesn't need you to do its job. Your job is to simply observe, investigate, and abide with the body as it breathes in and breathes out. Friends, we come to this meditation with many responsibilities, worries, and burdens, family and friends, work and school, thoughts about the past and the future, worries about the world, many things that will seek to come to our mind as we follow the breath. For the time of this meditation, practice letting go, laying down all of your burdens. There'll be plenty of time to pick them back up after the meditation is over. Just like the mighty Atlas of Greek mythology holds the world on his shoulders, so too do we each hold our world on our shoulders. A heavy burden. Lay your world down and follow the breath. As you follow the breath, your mind will become bored and will run away to the past or the future, across the world or the galaxy, or an external distraction like a thought will arise or a sound will arise, and your mind will go chasing after it, get agitated by it. Whenever this happens, know that this is not something that you did wrong or that you failed. This is simply the mind showing you how it works, showing you its craving. Whenever the mind gets distracted away from the breath, it will slowly start to dawn on you as your mindfulness grows that you've been taken away. At that time, fully marshal your mindfulness back and acknowledge that you've been taken away from the breath. Then practice letting go of the distraction by neither getting agitated and pushing it away, nor getting excited and grasping onto it. Simply giving it no energy, no attention, letting it go. And then return to the breath. Every time you get distracted away from the breath, acknowledge, let go, and return over and over. Don't worry about how many times you get distracted. Just keep returning back to the breath. The breath is home. It's always there waiting for you whenever you want to visit. Return back. Go deeper. As you're following the breath, Every once in a while, check in with the state of your mind. Is your mind becoming more tranquil and peaceful or not? As your mind becomes more tranquil and more calm, you may begin to notice subtle characteristics of the breath. You may see that sometimes the breath is long and deep, sometimes short and shallow. See if you can pay attention to this impermanence of the breath, how the breath is changing each time it comes in and goes out. Slowly start to open your eyes. Move from the internal to the external, becoming aware of the room around you. Returning to the live stream. I see, actually, I think This might be one of the first times we actually gained people watching through the meditation. Interesting. Well, friends, let's do our business before we'll do sharing of merits and closing out the stream. So, those of you who are here for Dhammapalooza for the first time, every Monday night, same time. Sometimes I'm in different places since I'm a nomad these days. The backdrop changes, but me and Dhammapalooza stays the same. But I'm going to be here at Empty Cloud for the next 2 months. So we'll be here with this nice fireplace and this Buddha who you can't see above me for the next couple of months here. So every Monday, same time, 8 p.m. Eastern. I also do every Wednesday, I put up a Ask a Bhante. So if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer in a video, either questions for yourself or questions you think might be good for other people, to, you know, people in years to come will be able to see the questions. So definitely send me some questions and I'll use them. I think I might be getting a little bit low on the store of questions for Ask a Bhante. If you're on Second Life, we do every Thursday night. I have my Second Life session, 8 p.m. Eastern. And if you're on the Discord, you know, we do our Sunday Suta Suta readings every Sunday night at 6 p.m. And that's pretty much it. I have June, I don't remember what, I have another retreat coming up, Maggaseka Zoom retreat on whole weekend on Satipatthana, which is going to be June 24th, maybe it is. Let me see here. Yeah, June 25th, 26th. So that's coming up as well. And if you'd like to keep informed of new things that are coming on, then you can go to my website. I'm going to put it there in the chat, maggaseka.org. If you go to that website, and on the right hand of the website, you can put your email in to subscribe. And anytime I post something, you'll get an email. So I always post lots of updates on that website. You could also do the, on the YouTube channel, you can subscribe and click the bell thing so that you get notified. One thing that I normally do is called Morning Monastery Experience, where every morning at 8 o'clock, we do a half hour of, precepts chanting and a little Dhamma talk. However, while I'm here, I don't think that is going to happen. We'll see. Starting next week, I might look to maybe do it a couple of days a week, just to keep it going. But we'll see how that goes. But other than that, I think that covers everything. I also am part of a community on Discord where we study and practice the early texts, the suttas. So if you'd like to possibly check out the community, then you can send an email to maggaseka@gmail.com and ask for an invite, and we'll send you an invite. All right, friends. Any final questions before we do sharing of merit? The chat tends to be very quiet after the meditation. That's fine. All right. Dukkha patta chaniddukkha, bhaya patta chanibhaya, soka patta chanisoka, hantu sabbe pipaniyo, etavata cha mehi sampadang punya sampadang, sabbe deva anumodantu, sabba sampatti siddhya, akasatta chabumata deva naga mahiddhika punyang tang anumoditva charang rakantu sabasang. May the suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit of ours for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas, nagas, and yakas of mighty power, share in this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right, friends. Until next time, Sukhihotu, may you be happy, practice well, and be well. May you have a spiritually successful and peaceful journey until we meet next. Good night.